Welcome to a This Week in Africa special report. Today, we examine one of the most painful contradictions on the African continent, a country that survived apartheid with the solidarity of its African neighbors, now turning on those very neighbors with violence, organized marches, and campaigns of expulsion. This is the xenophobia crisis in South Africa, and it escalated this week. What happened? This week, right now. Let us start with the facts on the ground, because this is not a historical story. It is a present one. On April 28th and 29th, 2026, Operation Dudula and a newer movement called March and March marched through schools, streets, and public squares in Johannesburg and Tshwane. March and March is led by Jacinta Ngobese-Zuma, a 39-year-old radio personality who founded the organization in 2025. Operation Dudula is fronted by Zandile Dudula, the same movement that a High Court order halted for violent conduct in November 2025. They are now back in the streets, operating in open defiance of that court's restrictions. What did they do this week? Operation Dudula members stormed schools in Johannesburg and verbally attacked foreign children and their parents at school gates. Disturbing videos circulated online showing children in uniform running in fear. Gunshots were fired at one school. A South African woman's viral video called on South African women married to Nigerian men to leave with their husbands back to where they're coming from, meaning the children too. An Ethiopian national was shot dead at a busy intersection in Johannesburg in what police describe as an apparent execution-style killing, captured on CCTV. The Zimbabwean government issued an emergency advisory urging its nationals in South Africa to stay indoors, limit movement, and keep their documents on them at all times. The Ghanaian diplomatic mission and Nigerian associations formally warned their citizens to close shops. Ghana summoned South Africa's acting High Commissioner. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights issued a formal condemnation on April 27th, calling this a long-standing pattern of xenophobic violence and demanding South Africa dismantle vigilante groups, prosecute perpetrators, and guarantee access to healthcare for all people, regardless of nationality. On April 28th, South Africa's Freedom Day, President Ramaphosa gave a speech condemning attacks on foreigners and warning citizens not to let their concerns breed prejudices and hatred toward our fellow Africans. He did not announce any specific enforcement action against March and March or Operation Dudula. They marched the next day anyway. The numbers behind the narrative. Here are the verified facts that the march's rhetoric contradicts. South Africa's official unemployment rate stood at 31.9% in Q3 2025, down slightly to 31.4% in Q4. Youth unemployment stands at 43.8%. Those numbers are devastating and real, but do they prove that immigrants are the cause? No. According to the Inclusive Society Institute's GovDem survey, distrust of African immigrants among South Africans climbed from 62.6% in 2021 to 73.1% in 2025. But distrust is not evidence. The Human Rights Watch World Report for 2026 is explicit. There is no factual basis for the claim that foreign nationals are primary drivers of crime or unemployment. South Africa's labour crisis is structural, rooted in weak economic growth, a broken education-to-work pipeline, power and logistics failures, and the unaddressed spatial consequences of apartheid. The foreign-born have become visible targets for failures that belong to those who have held power for 32 years. Operation Dudula itself is a case study in organised misdirection. Its name comes from the Zulu word meaning to push out. Al Jazeera documented its founding in 2021 when Freeman Pengu took a 9-hour bus trip from the Northern Cape to attend Operation Dudula's launch in Soweto. Many of its full-time activists are unemployed South Africans who gave up looking for work to become anti-immigrant campaigners. The organization tells people their suffering is caused by foreigners. The government tells people to be tolerant. Neither addresses the actual structural failure at the root of both. The history, a pattern, not an incident. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights traced this pattern back 28 years in its April 27th statement. The first documented killings of 3 foreign nationals in Johannesburg were in 1998, 4 years after democracy. In May 2008, nationwide xenophobic attacks killed over 60 people, injured 1,700, and displaced 100,000, requiring military intervention. In 2009, 1,500 to 2,500 Zimbabwean farm workers were forcibly evicted from their homes in Dodorns in the Western Cape. In 2015, military intervention was required again. In 2022, Operation Dudula disrupted a Mapostore church service in Limpopo. In 2025, the same group blockaded entrances to public health facilities in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal, demanding people prove citizenship before receiving medical care. A court ordered them to stop. They stopped temporarily. Then this week happened. This is not a cycle of isolated incidents. This is a 28-year pattern of organized violence against African migrants, escalating ahead of elections, tolerated by institutions, and driven by a political culture that has found it easier to scapegoat the foreign-born than to fix the economy. The political economy. Who benefits? Here is the question. Pan-African analysis must ask, who benefits from keeping South Africans angry at foreigners? Action SA, a registered political party, sent its representative Themba Mabunda to march with March and March on April 29th. Local government elections are scheduled for November 2026 to January 2027. Anti-immigrant sentiment, according to the Inclusive Society Institute, has been climbing for 5 years. And the politicians who have failed to deliver housing, fix Eskom, build schools, and create jobs are the same politicians who benefit most when the energy of the poor is directed at the foreign-born rather than at governance failure. March and March even met with South Africa's health ministry to propose biometric systems to exclude undocumented migrants from public hospitals. South African law explicitly guarantees every person, regardless of status, the right to emergency health care. These proposals are not policy reform. They are the organized removal of African people from the continent's most advanced healthcare system. The Pan-African Indictment. Here is the truth that must be spoken plainly. South Africa was built with the blood and solidarity of the African continent. Ghana gave shelter to ANC student leaders during apartheid. Mozambique housed ANC cadres and paid for it when Pretoria bombed Maputo. Tanzania, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Angola all hosted the liberation movement at enormous cost. Nigeria led continental calls for sanctions. The African continent did not abandon South Africa. What South Africa is doing to African migrants today is not simply a human rights violation. It is a betrayal of the Pan-African solidarity that made liberation possible. Children in school uniforms are running from mobs. An Ethiopian man was executed on a Johannesburg street in broad daylight. The Zimbabwean government is telling its citizens to hide. President Ramaphosa gave a speech. Operation Dudula gave a march. The African Union has 55 member states. One of them is systematically terrorizing the citizens of the others. That demands more than a press release.